Hi everyone, welcome back to another episode of our student athlete interviews. This series is basically interviewing various athletes at all levels in different sports to kind of get some insight put on what their lives are like. Our guest today is Lindsay Hunt. She is on the softball team at Campbell University. So let's get Lindsay in here.
On it.
Hi Lindsay.
Still on it.
Hey,
How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. Okay, so thank you so much for coming today.
Yeah, of course.
All right, we'll just go ahead and get started. So, when did you start playing softball, and why did you start playing softball?
So I started playing like t-ball for baseball when I was about 5. Um, I got into it because both my grandparents played baseball, and in addition, my mom tried to get me to play lacrosse, and I really didn't want to run.
Gotcha. So starting like sports really young, did you have any role models or favorite players while you were growing up?
Um, yeah, I was obsessed with like Big Papi from the Red Sox. I wanted to be just like him. And
Yeah.
definitely like both my grandparents.
Yeah, awesome. So you like started sports at a young age. When did you know that like softball was your thing and like this is what you wanted to do in college?
I kind of always knew, like, especially reaching like that middle school age, like when sports started becoming more serious and people started becoming more specialized, and that was primarily when I knew.
Yeah, awesome. So, your recruiting process to Campbell was a little bit different just because you did go through the transfer process.
Mhm.
Do you want to go into that and tell us a little bit about what that whole thing was like?
Yeah, so especially like my transfer experience was really different because I decided to transfer during COVID. So there was like no visiting going on, no like going to work out with teams, nothing. So I entered the transfer portal and it was kind of just like word of mouth. Like I reached out to some coaches, some reached out to me. And then I had a friend who goes to Campbell, so I asked her if she liked it, and she did. So and then I finally got in contact with the coach, and we talked a little bit, and she was like, "Well, you can't really come down and visit. So can you send me some videos of you playing?" So I did, and she called me. She was like, "All right, well, um, I'm gonna take a risk on you, and if you want to take a risk on me, since you've never been here, you really don't know anything, and you've never met us, then we'll have you." So I decided to take the risk and down to North Carolina and make a big change. So it was interesting. I showed up to campus, and I was like, "Oh, so this is what it looks like."
That's awesome. Would you say that was definitely a good chance to take?
Yeah, definitely was. It was cool. Just I've been moving into a completely different environment, being from Philly and then living in Philly when I went to Drexel and being in the city to going to a small town in North Carolina. Very
Yeah,
different, very cool.
for sure. That's awesome. Um, so you kind of went into it a little bit, but what made you chose Campbell during the transfer process as opposed to like maybe some of those schools that reached out to you or you were reaching out to?
hmm
What was the reasoning behind that?
Um, well, I wanted to go somewhere completely different.
Yeah.
I knew it was like a smaller school, so I was like, okay, that might be cool to meet some more people.
Yeah.
Um, from a softball aspect, I've just heard like some good things about how the program was run from my friends and how it was structured and set up and the facilities they had and the resources. Like I like the idea of having team lift.
Yeah.
At Drexel, it was more very individualized, very on your own. I like the idea of being around the team. They do a lot of team bonding stuff, which I liked.
Yeah.
Um, and there was a new coach. It was a young staff, and they were really building up the program, and I kind of like the idea of that.
Yeah. Awesome, for sure. So, kind of moving into the balancing of academics and softball, what would you say the biggest change from high school to college is, like both academically, and then also athletically on the field or in lift or that kind of thing?
So, from an academic aspect, like in high school, it was more you got assigned something, you did the assignment, and then you turned it in. But in college, it's a lot more you don't really have necessarily like assignments all the time. It's more you have to study all the time. Like you are learning something in class, you have to go home and read about it and study it and make sure you memorize it. It's a lot more of trying to understand the material instead of just handing in assignments.
For sure. Yeah. And then what about on the softball field? What would you say the biggest change is?
It's definitely a lot more structured from the aspect of like you get to lift and you know exactly what you're going to do.
Yeah.
You get to practice, you know exactly what you're going to do. Everything's scheduled out literally to the minute for us. It's like every 15 minutes is scheduled for us.
Yeah.
And you're always moving. Like it's never stopping. Like you're just constantly moving. And when you're there for those like 2-3 hours or whatever, like it's you give it everything you got. You don't stop moving. It's crazy.
Yeah. Especially because like in travel softball, a lot of times practices are longer. So it's
Mhm.
definitely a change. Um, so you kind of touched on this a little already, but how did the pandemic affect you during like this transition to Campbell? You didn't really know anybody yet. You said you had some friends, but you didn't know like the team dynamic and like what you were necessarily getting yourself into. So how did that impact you personally?
Yeah, it was definitely hard. It was harder to meet a lot of people. I mean, I met my teammates, but it was harder to get to know them because I guess they used to do like all these team bonding things and player dates they would call them, where you would go out with a teammate and like get to know who they were and like a
Yeah,
little bit about them. So it was really hard. I got to know like my roommate who was on the team very well because that's who I was with traveling all the time. Like we would stay together, we would be together, we would eat together, everything.
for sure.
It was definitely hard. And then even in classes, because I was in person, um, I would like be in class and I would talk to somebody who was next to me, but they would come up to me after class and I would have no idea who they were.
Yeah,
Or like I would know nothing about them. So I was pretty much basically really limited to just softball. And then a little bit of cross country because my one roommate was on the cross country team.
okay, cool. So earlier you mentioned a little bit about academics being a change from high school to college. So what would you say are like some tips or some points in order to balance academics and softball that helped you
Um,
maybe or that you've heard that helped?
yeah, get ahead when you can, kind of obvious, but it's definitely hard because if you push stuff off thinking that you have enough time, it just always ends up that you'll get a random assignment thrown in and it's like
Yeah.
everything's due all at once and you're just like, oh crap.
Yeah,
If I just would have gotten this one thing done sooner, it wouldn't have been a problem.
right.
Um, Honestly, my biggest advice is study like every day, like study the material every day, even if it's just for like a little bit so you have an idea. That way, when it comes test time, you're not overwhelmed trying to cram everything because most of the time, like you have multiple tests on the same day, and it
Yeah,
gets to be a lot.
for sure. Awesome. So, what would you say your greatest accomplishment is as an athlete, whether it's in college or back when you were younger?
Hmm, that's hard. Honestly, like just kind of like making it to this point, like
For
making it
sure.
to the college level and being able to maintain like your level while balancing being a student in addition to like when you're in college, like you're on your own, like you got to figure everything out, like you got to make sure it's like the little things, you got to go grocery shopping, you got to do your laundry, you got to clean, like it's just honestly like surviving as an
Yeah,
athlete is just really difficult, and I feel like a lot of people don't realize even those like little things of just making sure you're like making food or cleaning up is just catches up.
absolutely. Yeah. Okay, and then to wrap up, do you have any advice for student athletes like that are maybe going through the recruiting process that want to play at the collegiate level? Like, what would you say your biggest advice is to those people?
Find a school that you like with a coach that you like. I went in there like trying to just find the best place for me academically, and for that it worked out from an academic aspect, but then softball didn't work out, and that's okay, and that was just because I didn't really the coach wasn't necessarily what I thought, and the program wasn't what I thought. So it's really hard, like when you're recruiting, like I know like a lot of people say don't think about the coach or don't think about just only from a softball aspect, but it is really important that you pick a place and an environment that you thoroughly enjoy with the coaching staff that you know is going to support you.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining today.
Of course. Thanks for having me.
Have a good rest of your day.
Thanks, you too. Bye.